Back in time, once again, we see a civilization. Let's see how a civilization can be wiped off the map. The long, slow genocide begins in 1542. Like you said, when the Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo, he became the first European to discover California, came from Mexico, landed on Catalina, went over to what is now San Pedro, or what he called the Bay of Smokes, probably because he wanted that Jimson weed.
Oh boy, I want a little bit of fun today. But in Spanish.
Yo quiero fiestas. So he was greeted by some tongue, but quiche.
I'm gonna spell it the way that I saw that it should be said.
Quiche. That's a very offensive word that you just
I can't believe
out.
You've been saying that the whole time. We have to re-record.
So he was greeted by them. They paddled out to see him. It was a friendly meeting. Cabrillo then continued north upstate, and his men returned to Mexico, told the people of the beautiful land that existed over there. Nobody cared, so they pretended it didn't exist for 100 years or so. However, by the mid-1700s, Russia had set up their own colony in Alaska.
Russia. Ivan Drago.
They set up their own colony in Alaska to get fur, but they were getting bolder and bolder, and they kept coming further down south, the Pacific coast, looking for otters. Those wily Russians always trying to get more otters.
That's a cartoon right there, isn't it?
Follow that otter!
You ought or not.
But Tsar! So they got as far as Oregon before the Spanish King Carlos III became afraid of losing California to the Russians, and also the British from the east were starting to expand west out of New England, so he launched 3 ships from La Paz in Baja California on January 9th, 1769 to go colonize Alta California. So while these 3 ships sailed way up north, another party was launched on land headed by Don Gaspar de Portola, who was the first governor of Alta California. Spain knew that it didn't have the resources to match either Russia or Britain in a fight, so the king's plan was 3-pronged.
Let's hear it. Uno prong. That's not even first.
No, uno prong. Uno prong. He'd set up pueblos. Dos prong. Private ranchos. Catorce prong.
Clear understanding of the language.
He'd set up missions. By setting up missions in which to indoctrinate the natives with Christianity, he could, in a way, control them into defending the land in his name if it came to that.
Soldiers
of fortune. So in 54 years, 21 missions were built along the California coast. The last one was built in 1823, and all of them are generally near the 101 freeway.
Yeah.
The man...
Listen...
But the man wouldn't have it.
Man's always got to keep us down.
So the man put in charge of running the missions was a Franciscan priest named Junipero Serra. That's the last time I'm going to pronounce it correctly. As all the priests did, he saw the natives as poor and wretched, and he wanted to save them in the name of Jesus. So Serra headed to San Diego to set up the first mission, while Portola headed further north with another priest named Juan Crespi. And on August 2nd, 1769, Portola's party arrived at the LA River and camped at what is now the area where Broadway hits the river in Elysian Park.
Oh, okay.
And on their first day here, they had 3 earthquakes.
Because Jesus was on their side, right?
It must be a sign that we should go. No. So after this, they headed west down what is now Wilshire, past the tar pits. On August 4th, they went to LACMA. On August 4th, they camped in what is now Westwood.
Ugh.
So...
Go on.
Don't know why you don't like it.
So nowhere to park.
Yeah, I like that. From here, they tried to go along the coast to head further north, but the cliffs of the Pacific Palisades were too much for them, so some of the natives suggested a trail that headed north more inland, which was the Sepulveda Pass. So once they got over the hill, they discovered the valley, and they stopped at a natural spring, which became known as Rancho Los Encinos. They called the whole area of the valley El Valle de Santa Catalina de Bononia de los Encinos, a.k.a. St. Catherine of Bologna's Valley of the Live Oaks.
You mean they didn't name it Tarzan after Tarzan?
No, Tarzan was a prehistoric man. They thought, let's give it to the Bolognas.
No, come on. The Bolognas have gone through so much recently.
So the Tataviam, like you said, were living there, and they called it Ashwa Komi Habit.
You said it perfectly.
With
as much confidence as I have.
So it's still there today. It's on Ventura Boulevard at the intersection with Balboa. That's Rancho Los Encinos. We're there all the time. You'll find us there any day feeding ducks.
Mean-ass ducks.
Those are the geese. The ducks didn't do anything wrong.
They all want bread. I don't have all the bread in the world. You think my pockets are full of bread? I got mints too, you know.
I want crumbs too.
Pigeons get mints. Ducks get bread. And they got to learn the separation between the two.
So they met another group of natives that were living around the springs, and they spent time together in peace. And Father Crespi saw this big area of land, and he wanted this to be the location of the first mission in the area. But the plans got delayed, and eventually the Portola expedition headed further north up Balboa.
Okay.
And they left the valley through the San Fernando Pass onto greater and more horrible things, cholera. So the area that was decided to be the site of LA's first mission was San Gabriel. So Mission San Gabriel Arcangel, named after the Archangel Gabriel, who is the patron saint of broadcasters and diplomats, was founded on September 8th, 1771 under Father Junipero Serra and the missionaries Pedro Benito Cambon and Angel Fernandez Somera y Balbunia.
I'm loving all of this, by the way.
All of that was part of his name.
Oh, that was all part of his name.
Yeah.
Let's not forget Becerra, or however you're going to say it.
So they came as part of a party from San Diego. It was the 4th California mission, and the original location was near what is now Lincoln Avenue and San Gabriel Boulevard near the Whittier Narrows.
Okay.
It was an area that the natives called Shivangan.
Let's mark that as 12 because I was just so offensively said because you had no confidence in it.
Shivangan. So they were there, but by 1775, it was relocated to its current location 3 miles northwest to an area the natives called Lisanchanga.
You did that in Chinese voice, and you know you did.
I don't get who these people are.
I can't place them.
Where are they from? So they called it Lisanchanga. Today we call it 428 South Mission Drive in San Gabriel.
It's a beautiful language, English.
We just had to make it more accessible.
How would a calculator say it? 425.
But if you turn it upside down, it says boobs.
Boobs. It says menopause if you turn it upside down.
So I think they moved because of flooding, but there's no record exactly of why. Now, how did the natives feel about these people setting up shop on their land, you ask?
I'm curious. Tell me.
When the San Gabriel people first arrived, supposedly the natives in the area were very hostile, but the missionaries showed them a painting of the Virgin Mary, and they were so taken by the beauty of it, they let them stay. That's the story that the church tells.
Wow, that's ridiculous.
That painting is now on display in the church at San Gabriel right next to the altar.
Did you feel okay with letting them stay?
I went in there with lighter fluid and a torch, and I was ready to burn it down, but I saw that painting. Anyway,
this episode is non-sponsored by the missions.
This episode brought to you by Pope. So the natives were pretty cooperative, and they were willing to live alongside the Christians, and they even helped them build the mission. The church at San Gabriel is the oldest stone, brick, and mortar building in Southern California. Mm-hmm. It was made between 1791 and 1805. It takes a long time for people to do things back then. It has a very Moorish look compared to all the other missions. The mission itself was like fortress-like. It had 5-foot thick walls. Ooh. It was referred to as the Queen of the Missions or the Pride of the Missions. And at its prime, it covered several thousand acres of land. Its main bell weighs a ton, and it can be heard ringing up to 8 miles away.
Wow.
So since it was located on such fertile ground, this mission accounted for 1/4 of all the stock and grain wealth of all the California missions. Mm-hmm. California's first orange and tangerine trees were planted here. The San Gabriel mission introduced large-scale viticulture, which is the study and growth of grapes, to California, when the Spanish brought with them a grapevine from Spain that grew and grew until eventually the San Gabriel mission became the largest winery in all of California. It's this massive vine, and it's still there now, the same vine that they brought, and it's covered in bees. So they had they also had California's first instance of pest control in the form of a hole in one of the doors so that a cat could come in.
That's pest control?
It's the best they could have.
That was the best fed cat in Southern California.
So many.
That's another cartoon right there too.
The best fed cat in Southern California.
I'm pretty sure that's a Speedy Gonzales cartoon I've seen. They have a mission. There's a cat there. Speedy wants cheese. And Slowpoke is there being just as offensive as he can be.
Being torn to pieces by the Franciscan cat. The first large boat built entirely from native materials, the Guadalupe, was also built here. The anchor's still in the courtyard there. Their cemetery is the oldest cemetery in Los Angeles.
Really?
The missionaries were also the first to bring palm trees to the area because they were very biblical and they liked that sort of thing. But I'm not sure which mission had them first.
I'm sorry, I got lost because I didn't know that's how palm trees came over. I thought it was
It's not a native thing.
I didn't think it was a native thing. I thought it was like a California in the 40s wanting to be Hawaii thing. I guess not.
No, it was California in the 1770s wanting to be Hawaii. So in 1776, the De Anza expedition stopped at the San Gabriel mission, which the mission seems to think is very important. But what is important is that in 1781, a group of people known as the Pobladores left the San Gabriel mission and headed across the river to found the Pueblo de Los Angeles and start the city that we live in today.
Oh, boy.
So this was the cradle of Los Angeles as we know it, this mission. But who was living there and making it run? Well, other than some pious Spaniards, it was the Kitsch and the native people in that area. But why would the Quiche, why would the Quiche,
It was the first stroke recorded that long without medical attention.
But why would the Quiche, a people who generally considered themselves to be powerful and happy, why would they willingly give up their well-established lives to completely join a new civilization? A lot of them didn't, but a lot of them did. So the ones that did were drawn in by what the mission had to offer. They had nice utensils, they had exotic food, they had weird animals, they had different art than they had ever seen, they had music they had never heard. They promised to teach them how to make all these things and more for their own. All of these things the Quiche knew that they could use to their advantage to trade with other tribes and make their own lives better. Less subtle than that, the missionaries offered guns, swords, stronger spears, thicker armor, so they got the hint that they could either use these things for themselves or they could have them used against them by the Spanish.
Oh, wow.
So in that way, the missionaries kind of intimidated them by kindness into joining them. So Serra's intention for the missions was to create a community where the Spanish and the natives would live together in harmony, but he saw a necessary part of that to be for all of the natives to convert to Christianity. So the Franciscan brand of Christianity relies heavily on powerful and intimidating imagery, as well as the things that they were preaching to the Quiche and the salvation that they were promising. All that was very easy to get caught up in. So as a result of all this, people started moving into the missions in droves. Some of the chiefs were moving their entire villages to San Gabriel. In the first 2 years, there were only 73 Quiche who were converted into neophytes, as they called them. In 1783, 638 converts. In 1790, they took in 1,040 converts. Their biggest year ever was 1870, when 1,701 Quiche converted to Christianity.
It sounds like a Jonestown.
In a way. By 1834, the San Gabriel mission had baptized 6,814 Quiche. And if you were saying there were only about 10,000, maybe, that's kind of a lot.
I don't know numbers. I know a lot of zeros is something.
So trade was good at the mission.
Trade was good.
And yes, I don't know why you said that, but sure, it sure was. And on the surface, things seemed to be going very well. Around 1810, some of the neophytes were even living in homes similar to those that the Spanish settlers themselves lived in. But many of the Quiche were very skeptical of the Spanish promises that they would be able to retain their own cultures in addition to accepting the Christian culture.
Living in a harmony with a superiority.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
What's the problem? They were skeptical about the Spanish promises. That it became very clear very quickly that their skepticism was well-founded and resentment started to grow. The neophytes were not treated as equals. They were still seen as lesser souls by the missionaries, and they were treated accordingly. There was rape, there was thievery, there was abuse. They were made to do all the hard labor of building and making products like soap and leather and stuff like that, but they were paid very little, if at all. The daily life there was very rigid and scheduled, which Catholics love, but the natives didn't. So the bells in the churches would ring to signify to them all when it was time to wake up, when it was time to eat, when it was time to start their next job, like an elementary school. So in essence, they were slaves, but not quite as cruelly as the African slaves in the South, but slavery is still slavery. And the Quiche, of course, they missed the freedom of their old lives. So the missionaries allowed the neophytes to travel around and visit other tribes that had not joined, or Gentiles, as they called them, but only because they thought that was a good way to spread the word of their mission and to get new followers. But if you didn't come back from one of these trips, may their beloved God help you, because the Spanish soldiers, who were a constant presence at the mission, would track you down, bring you back, chain you up, and severely flog you for trying to escape.
Hey, but we love you. You're one of us, but don't go away. Seriously, it's the whip's a heavy thing. I don't want to have to bring it out.
Don't make me do this. I love you so much, don't make me beat you. In addition, as we all know, the Spanish brought with them. The Spanish were covered in germs. Let's not tiptoe around it. They brought with them a bunch of germs that the Quiche weren't used to, so a large part of their numbers were obliterated by disease. For a while, there were almost as many Quiche that were dying from disease as there were being converted at the missions. So in addition...
There's a revolving door.
It was, into the afterlife. So in addition, the livestock that the Spanish brought with them were destroying the wildlife that the Quiche relied on for food, so a lot of people were starving to death as well. It resulted in something of an inadvertent genocide, if there is such a thing. So the poor conditions that resulted among the Quiche pushed even more into the mission just for safety and to have a chance of surviving in this newly apocalyptic world that they had created. So there was a lot of tension inside the mission, not only between the neophytes and the Spanish, but also between the Quiche, who came from different villages around LA that didn't quite get along. Yeah. The priests would usually maintain the peace among them in the mission, but the mission itself was being raided fairly regularly by the outside. In 1810, a Quiche force of 800 warriors raided San Gabriel and made off with 3,000 sheep. Also, the Mojave from the Colorado River, who used to come to the area to trade, now they came to the area to raid.
Raid was good.
So they repeatedly attacked both the Quiche villages and the missions. So they built walls around the missions to protect them, but that didn't stop them. Within the mission itself, there was a flare-up in 1785 when a neophyte named Nicholas Jose had to endure the combo of watching a Spanish soldier make a pass at his fiancée and not being able to do anything about that, and then being told that he was no longer free to do his native dances. So obviously, he wanted the fathers of the missions killed. So he went to a 24-year-old holy woman from the Quiche tribe named Toypurina for help. She was considered by many as a witch or a sorceress, so Jose went to her and asked her to put a death spell on them. And Toypurina was already enraged by how her people were being treated in the mission. She was also disgusted by how readily so many of her people had embraced the mission in the first place, so she agreed, and with Jose, she began to recruit some natives to attack the San Gabriel mission and start a rebellion. And on the night of October 25th, 1785, Toypurina, with an army of 2 chiefs and a dozen or so warriors, climbed the mission walls where Jose was waiting for them, and he led them into the Padre's bedroom. That's father.
Don't like Padre.
You have some serious Padre issues. He was leading them to the bedroom, but when they walked in, the Padres already appeared to be dead. So they got in closer to see what was going on when one of the dead Padres jumped up and yelled, "Santiago!" and then Spanish soldiers filled the room. What had happened was some soldiers had overheard their plans that Jose and Toypurina had made, and they used it against them, and they tricked them. So some of the rebels fled. The rest were put in jail. Their trial was January 3rd, 1786. The chiefs claimed that they had been tricked by the witch woman Toypurina and that they really had nothing against the mission. And then when Toypurina came in for questioning, supposedly she had her hands tied behind her back. She kicked over the chair that was given to her. She refused to sit down. And she went on to say how much she hated the Padres and, quote...
The baseball team.
She was a huge Angels fan. Actually, she didn't like Angels too much, if I'm reading this correctly.
She sounds like a Dodger to me.
A mission Dodger. Supposedly, the quote that she said was, "I came to inspire the dirty cowards," meaning the Quiche, "to fight and not to quail at the sight of the Spanish sticks that spit fire, and do not retch at the evil smell of gun smoke, and be done with you white invaders." So then Jose came in and confessed to planning the whole thing. That was his closing act. Speech? I did it.
She convinced me. with the gunpowder speech. It's really hard to find a woman innocent when they describe her as the witch woman.
And bring in the witch woman. The warriors were released after 20 lashings each to show them that Toypurina's sorcery was powerless against the true faith. Christianity.
Oh, the whip wasn't the truth faith?
It's the only faith they knew.
Our Lord and Savior, whip.
All hail Cato Nine Tails. Jose and the two chiefs, they were sent to San Diego to await sentencing, but Toypurina remained in jail at San Gabriel for over a year until March 8th, 1787. She was baptized by one of the padres that she had tried to kill, and she was given the name Regina. So it's not clear if she did this willingly or if it was forced on her.
How could it be willingly?
How could it be willingly? But listen to this. She had a Quiche husband who refused to convert. So then what happened to Jose? He got exiled for 6 years to Monterey. The two chiefs were free to return to their villages, but they were being watched all the time from now on. But here's the weird thing that I'm confused about Toypurina.
You mean Regina?
Reggie.
As she
likes to go by.
Go ahead.
She comes out of there with a beehive hairdo.
It's mashed potato time.
Is Frankie Valli around yet? Toypurina, the church annulled her marriage, and then she was exiled to the mission in Carmel.
Okay.
Caramel. The Caramel mission.
I got a caramel mission.
So this is what confused me. In 1789, she got remarried to a Spanish soldier, and then she had 4 kids, and she died 10 years later. And she's buried at the Mission San Juan Bautista. So I don't know, like, if you didn't do it willingly, why would you marry?
It's not like they needed her permission for that.
No. I don't know. They didn't have any rights, maybe.
It doesn't sound like you changed my name to Regina. I got an idea. I'll marry that guy. Have a couple kids.
Settle down. Yeah, because I kept hearing about Toypurina, like, oh, she's the revolutionary, but then her story just kind of fizzles out and is a little bit of a betrayal.
It could have been willingly after that big speech.
I know, but a year in prison does a lot to somebody.
She wrote her book. She just came to her senses. That's really horrible. That's the best way to kill a revolutionary, is to make her seem like a housewife.
Yeah, a housewife, and also make her seem like a sorceress witch. They knew what they were doing. Her message and her conviction just sort of fizzled out, but her legacy is still strong locally in LA. There's a Toypurina monument at the Baldwin Park Metrolink stop. At the Ramona Gardens public housing in Boyle Heights, there's a big mural of her. Yeah, she's like seen as something of a Joan of Arc now, although she did give in to the...
Maybe she read about Joan of Arc, was like, yeah, no.
I don't want to do that.
I don't.
I could get burned at the stake or marry a nice Spaniard.
It's got really nice hands.
So there was also just a play about her a couple months ago at the San Gabriel Mission Playhouse.
Oh, really?
So her legacy is alive, whatever her legacy is. So after this whole incident, there were crackdowns in the mission, and there was more weariness about trusting the Quiche as equals. So all this was going on in San Gabriel. Meanwhile, a little further north, Father Crespi's dream of a mission in the valley was realized. The Spanish wanted a way to recruit the natives that were living in the northern parts of LA, the Tataviam and all them, and also a way to link between the Ventura mission and the San Gabriel mission.
There's a lot of space between the two.
Yeah. So they decided on the northern part of the valley to build Mission San Fernando Rey de España on September 8th, 1797. It was the 17th of the 21 missions. It was founded by Father Fermin Lasuen, the successor to Father Serra, and the missionaries Francisco Dumetz and Juan Lope Cortez. It was originally named...
It was pretty lame.
It was originally named La Misión del Señor Fernando Rey de España, the mission of Mr. Fernando, King of Spain.
Mr. Fernando and his
there
mission.
Was something... And it was nicknamed the Mission of the Valley. It was named after King Ferdinand III of Spain. He was the patron saint of Spain, engineers, and of prisoners.
Okay.
So the land it was built on...
What do I get? Engineers, prisoners, whatever's left.
Spain. The land it was built on was called Pachegna, by the natives.
Okay.
We now call it 15151 San Fernando Mission Boulevard in Mission Hills. This is the only mission in the LA city limits, as San Gabriel is part of LA County.
That's right.
So at the time it was going to be built, the mayor of the LA Pueblo, Francisco Reyes, was living on the land, but he either willingly gave it up or was forcibly evicted by the soldiers, depending on which story you believe. On the day of its opening, they celebrated by baptizing 5 Kitsch boys and 5 Kitsch girls. Reyes himself was the godfather to the first one baptized. Within the first 2 months at San Fernando, over 40 natives had joined. By 1804, there were almost 1,000. So around this time, though, most of the native villages were dying out or had already joined San Gabriel or were working for the settlers on the private ranchos or at the Pueblo, so they weren't interested in the mission, or they had just moved inland to escape it all. So by around 1810, San Fernando hit a rough spot because there was just not enough workers to get what they needed done. To make things worse, in 1812, a huge earthquake hit LA that did serious damage to both the missions. They managed to bounce back and they hit their peak in 1819. They had over 21,000 heads of livestock and they were covering 121,542 acres of land. To give you an idea, the entire valley is around 167,000 acres. Wow. So the valley was a mission. They had bullfighting. Their olive trees were said to be the best in California. Their location was perfect because they were right on the main road that travelers had to take to get into the growing Los Angeles Pueblo. In 1822, the Convento building, which is the iconic arched building that you see that's identified with that mission.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You seen it? You see it right now?
Yeah, I've seen it. I could see it in my head. I could draw it if you want me to.
Please do.
Okay. That's the sound of me trying.
With a whistle. So it was finished after 12 years of construction. It was used as the Padres' quarters and a guest house for travelers. It's the largest freestanding adobe structure in California and the largest original building still standing of any of the California missions. So this same year, a big shift happened in the land. 1822, Mexico won its independence from Spain and took possession of California. So now the Kitsch were no longer Spanish, they were Mexican.
Walking around handing out cards and say, hey, by the way, you're Mexican now.
Dropping flyers.
Thanks for joining the winning team.
Put away the tapas, get a taco. The Mexican government did not like the Franciscans, and they promised the Kitsch that they would get their land back that the Spanish had taken from them, and they would be allowed to govern themselves again. But these promises kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed. These were the years when the missions were in their death throes. So there were more crackdowns on the natives. Anybody who wasn't converted was gone after. The attacks by the Mojave continued, and the Yokuts from the north of the state started to attack as well. More settlers started coming into the area, and the land was needed to accommodate all these people. So finally, the process of secularization to dismantle the missions began 10 years later than when they promised. In 1834, and that process itself would take 10 years to complete. So what was worse, all the land that the Mexican government promised to give back to the Kitsch, they confiscated it and took it for themselves because the official...
We're going to hold it for you. It's yours, but we're going to hold it for you, and you get no decision making on the matter. But it's yours, though.
The officials were so corrupt that they either offered the land at prices that the Kitsch couldn't afford, or they just swindled them out of it and gave it to their friends and family. Governor Pio Pico gave the land of San Fernando to his brother, and then he ended up using the mission itself as his headquarters. In 1846, Mission San Gabriel was so deeply in debt, it was sold to 2 guys named Reed and Workman.
No first name. No paper signed.
It's one guy, Reed and Workman.
Oh yeah, Reed and.
Once the missions were secularized, the land was given away, but the church got to keep the priest's quarters, the gardens, and the chapel. A little side note during all of this, on March 8th, 1842, gold particles were found in an onion patch in Placerita Canyon in San Clarita, which was part of the San Fernando mission. There wasn't much gold found, but it was California's first recorded gold strike.
Oh boy.
So this led to a mini gold rush where treasure seekers were ransacking the area trying to find gold for many years to come. They eventually tore up the floor of the church at the mission because they thought that the Padres were hoarding all the gold and hiding it in the floor of the chapel.
Oh, it's only silver.
What are these, rubies? While all this was happening to the missions, the Kitsch were basically forced to reassimilate into the new Mexican world. After having to be in the Spanish world, now they got to get used to Mexicans.
Just the emphasis on that.
I'm trying to get used to them, okay? Many of them took jobs working in the growing city of Los Angeles or on the many ranches that were popping up. Many of them moved upstate towards Riverside, Bakersfield, or even Monterey. They were given some rights by the Mexican government, but they were still treated as second-class citizens, and they were routinely discriminated against and abused. Didn't take long for another huge shift to happen to the area when Mexico went to war with the United States. In 1847, American soldiers arrived at San Fernando, and in 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed and made California a U.S. territory. And then Colonel John Charles Fremont made San Fernando his headquarters, and in 1850, California officially became a United state.
Happy birthday, California. It's just funny that these missions are like top bunk. No, I want top bunk. Get out. I'm top bunk now.
Oh, I got San Gabriel.
I guess it's okay. Better than the floor, but I don't know.
So it was a United state. Then on May 31st, 1862, President Lincoln signed all the missions back into the possession of the Catholic Church, but they didn't seem to do much with them for a while. San Fernando became Lopez Station for the Butterfield stage lines from 1857 to 1861. By 1888, it was a warehouse for the Porter Land and Water Company, which is the same Porter of Porter Ranch.
Oh, okay.
And by 1896, it was a hog farm.
The hogs slept in the Padres' quarters.
That's when California went under the jurisdiction of Hog.
J.B. Hoggington.
Oink mix squiggles. Squiggles. Pigs don't have squiggles. Seeing it as a hog farm was too much for a certain Charles Fletcher Lummis.
Oh.
I don't know if that name rings a bell.
It does.
He was the city librarian who had walked from Ohio to LA on a dare. And he started to campaign to save our missions. So he reprimanded the city, saying, "We shall deserve and shall have the contempt of all thoughtful people if we suffer our noble missions to fall." He didn't get too much done. He was too busy trying to get nudie French novels allowed in the libraries. But the movement he set in motion, it ended up reopening San Fernando's church in 1923 under the tutelage of the Oblate Fathers. Eventually landed them a big grant from the Hearst Foundation in the 1940s to fully restore the San Fernando Mission grounds. It was all a waste, though, because in 1971, the Silmar earthquake completely destroyed the whole mission except for the Convento building.
Wow.
So what is now there, aside from the Convento, is just a replica of what it used to be.
Really?
San Fernando was visited by Pope John Paul III in 1987, but then it was hit by its third major earthquake in the 1994 Northridge earthquake, and was shut down for a while again. So most of what is there now is a replica of a replica, except for
the hog statue.
You could still smell the hog. You just can't get that smell out. The only thing that's original is the Convento, which has still stood in Brand Park, which is the little park across the street from San Fernando.
Yeah.
The original fountain of the mission is still there as well. San Fernando is now a fully functioning church. My sister was just part of a wedding there, so it's true. I have confirmation. The Convento was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1988, and the mission as a whole was added in 1999. Buried in a special garden on the grounds of San Fernando is Bob Hope, for some reason that I still can't figure out. A huge chunk of the mission is dedicated to Bob Hope now.
Is there any explanation at all?
He was actually Pope for a little bit.
Pope Hope?
All hail Pope Hope. All hail Hope Pope. Have hope.
His campaign. Popes don't campaign, but that campaign would have been a Hope.
Have hope. Elect Hope for Pope. It's no joke. So buried in the public cemetery behind the mission are Clarence Ducky Nash, the voice of Donald Duck, the rifleman Chuck Connors, Ed Begley Sr., Fred Mertz, a.k.a. William Frawley, and Richie Valens is there. The cemetery across the street also has Lenny Bruce and Groucho Marx, so go make a day of it and disrespect the dead. Also buried in unmarked areas around the premises, 2,425 natives.
Mass grave.
Not a mass grave, just a scattered grave. San Gabriel, though, has the bones of some 6,000 natives on its grounds. How'd they die? So San Gabriel was reinstituted as a church and went through various renovations over the years. In 1987, it was hit by a major earthquake and was closed until 1996.
Take the hint.
God wants us here. This is good. So now San Gabriel is the mother church of the LA Archdiocese.
Mommy church.
Mama church.
Mama church. Feeding all the other churches.
So the mission look has had a huge influence on the architectural style that came to define LA, the Spanish style, ranch style houses. But what happened to the kitsch, you ask me?
I'm curious. I didn't finish my research.
Well, once they fell under the jurisdiction of the United States, the few rights that had been given to them by the Mexican government were promptly revoked, and it was made explicitly clear that they were not citizens of the new country. So between 1845 and 1855, it's estimated that 100,000 natives in the whole country died from starvation, disease, and violence. I read that the state even reimbursed some groups if they went out killing natives.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the worst thing I've ever heard.
I tried to find a defense of that. There is nothing. In 1850, the same year that California became a state, what was passed was an Act for the Government and Protection of the Indians, which made it legal to arrest any native that was loitering or begging or buying liquor or being otherwise deemed immoral. Once convicted, the native in question then had to work for that guy that arrested him for a maximum of 4 months in indentured servitude. Oh my God. They couldn't even fight it because it was also illegal for a native to testify against a white person. So a common thing that they would do, they'd go out on a Sunday night, arrest a bunch of natives that were drunk, take them to a corral behind Downey Block, which is the future first location of the LA Public Library.
Oh boy.
And then sell them in the morning. So,
what?
They would sell humans for labor that
like
they were
products.
forced to do. The natives were
Why is the world so sad?
A year of doing this, I've never been more sad this year.
Oh, good people are treated awful. Anyways.
Not even, just people.
Just people. There are no good people. Let's not forget that.
Natives were segregated the same as blacks and Asians. They could only live in certain area. They couldn't display their ethnicity. They were even called diggers by the Americans because they believed that they survived only on roots that they dug up.
Okay.
So before we jump to any conclusions about white people, Greg, some of the worst abuse that the natives were getting came from Mexicans who themselves were being oppressed, and I guess they needed a release for that.
S-word rolls down a hill.
It sure does, S-word. Many kitsch, they simply pretended to be Mexican just to avoid the abuse and to try to get some basic human rights from the U.S. government. Yeah. By 1900, very few people still identified themselves as kitsch, and the common teaching was that they were extinct. And the people who were from that group were like, well, I'm right here. I'm here, and I count. So after World War I, however, the kitsch culture started to make a resurgence. In 1919, the Mission Indian Federation was formed, and some of the kitsch joined. In 1924, partly due to their service during the war, Native Americans were made U.S. citizens. In 1928, the Mission Indian Federation sued the U.S. for damages. In 1944, they won the case, but they weren't paid until 1950 in the form of $150 given to 36,000 qualifying natives. So that should just about cover it.
Okay, yeah, that's how
this never happened.
Here's your trauma payment. What qualifying Native Americans is a weird statement. Do you qualify? Let's see all the paperwork. Okay, everything's in order.
What do you do with this peace pipe?
13.
Edit it out.
What do you do with this piece of pipe? What's it for? It's a water pipe.
So the last born native kitsch speaker, the last person from that tribe who spoke their native language, died in the mid-70s, but there were records, like you said, of their language that were found, so it's slowly being reassembled. From what it seems, there are only around 1,700 people out there that identify themselves as kitsch. They have a tribal council. Their legacy still lives on, and the names around town, like you said. A few other ones. Tahunga. Topanga.
Oh, yeah.
Kitsch. They were acknowledged by the state of California as a tribe in 1994.
That's cool.
But they are still not federally recognized as a native tribe, so they have no reservation. They'll never get a table.
1994, that's a really long time.
Yeah, about 200 years.
Yeah.
So the missions, outposts of the Spanish Empire though they were, ostensibly were meant to hold the land for the natives until they were deemed ready by the crown to run it for themselves, whenever that might have been. And maybe they were intending to do that, but not everything that's done with the best intentions turns out very well. If you'll you'll ask the Japanese people that lived in Los Angeles and were shut up in internment camps, they will tell you the same thing. So just go see the missions before another earthquake destroys them all.
How do we sum that up?
What do we say? We're both just staring at each other with mouths agape at the horror of what we just told each other.
Continued oppression through the centuries.
Ethnic cleansing, that kind of worked.
What do you mean kind of worked? Oh, got rid of them?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
They almost destroyed a people.
Like 70%. That's and that's the roots of Los Angeles.
Proud to be an American, or at least I know there's no natives.
There's a long legacy of Los Angeles trauma. Promises being made and then just like, nah, forget it.